Okay, we are live stream. This is Senate Finance. We are ahead of the game. We got the adult use and medical cannabis bill this morning, but I knew it was coming, so we have it scheduled for this afternoon. And this has been through economic development. Did it go through health and welfare too?
They, you asked, the economic development asked health and welfare to weigh in, so they took it up. They went through the medical program. They gave their recommendations to economic development, and you incorporated those into the economic development amendment.
So last but not least is Senate Finance, and there are some fee changes and things in here that are our jurisdiction. So Michelle, the floor is yours.
Sure. So thanks, and for the record, Michelle Childs, Office of Legislative Counsel. And did you want me to just note as I go through the sections that impact money, even if it's not generating a fee?
Yeah, just 20,000 foot.
Sure.
Because if we start to get off our jurisdiction, it's going to be reworking weeks of work in the other committees.
Okay, so I'm going to take you just through the sections that I think you will be particularly interested in. So section 1 is a repeal of the Cannabis Control Board's advisory committee. When the adult use market was set up in 2020, the legislature chose to include an advisory committee made up of a variety of folks with different expertise in areas to help inform them going forward and adopting the rules and setting up the system, which they have done. And so the board had requested that the advisory committee be disbanded.
For those that are new, how many years did it take us? And didn't the former final committee of conference run over? This was a long time in the making.
I think it was Senate Government Operations that started working on setting this up in 2015, and then the language, the adult use was finally agreed upon between the two bodies in October of 2020. We had that late session because of COVID. Right. So it didn't take about, and there have been obviously many bills before.
There were a lot of compromises made to get to this point, and now that we're dealing with reality, we're starting to look at some of those compromises and make adjustments.
Right, because the retail market didn't roll out until last fall. For adult use, just for folks who haven't, who I don't want to talk to about cannabis all the time. So General Assembly decriminalized personal possession for 21 and over in 2013, 2014. We've had a medical registry since 2004. And then the legislature legalized possession of an ounce or less, plus a couple plants for 21 and over in 2018, and then the commercial, and then the legislation for the setting up the commercial adult use was enacted in 2020, and then the first permits were issued in 2022 because you had to set up the new regulatory agency, adopt rules, go through all of that. So we're really just now starting to, with the board coming back to you and saying this is how it's going, these are the tweaks we need. So this has been considered primarily a kind of a CCP housekeeping bill. So that was the first one, and changing the and repealing the advisory committee. And Brent's here if you want to know reasons why and things like that. I won't speak to those necessarily, but that committee, there are per diems and expenses provided for some members, but most of them, it was very negligible. So it's not really, I don't think,
Our glorious $50 a day.
making any true savings there by disbanding the advisory committee. So next changes are on page 7. And so this is section 6, and this has to do with cultivation of cannabis. And so last year, the General Assembly passed a bill that afforded certain benefits to small cultivators, licensed cultivators. And so those are folks who are 1,000 square feet or less, so very small cultivators. And they have certain benefits under the law, and
those went through this committee. Well,
yes,
the tax
yep.
ones did.
Yep, and so what this is doing in section 6 is doing, sorry, is it extending it to all cultivators who are outdoor cultivators. And so I think primarily the area that you're going to be looking at are enrollment and use value. And then there are some tax exemptions for buying certain equipment and things like that. And again, I think Ted will talk to you about those and the impacts of it.
And we did those for small cultivators,
Right.
which is 1,000 square feet.
Yes.
And large cultivators are limited to something just shy of a half an acre.
Correct.
It's not fields of wavy grain. It's
And they,
very small.
According to the board, by opening this up to all cultivators, so beyond tier 1, would only add about 8 acres. Correct. So the next changes for you are page 10. I'll just note here, there's a provision in for rulemaking for a new type of licensing, and I'll kind of stick to that. There's currently the types of licenses that you can have are cultivator, wholesaler, product manufacturer, retailer, testing laboratory, or integrated license is available only to those medical dispensaries who are currently vertically integrated. And they're allowed to have 1 license under the adult use system, but everybody else you have to get a separate license. Like, so if you want to do 2 different things, if you want to be a cultivator and direct sale, you have to have a cultivation and a retail license. There is a new license that's being added at the request of the board, and that's for propagation or propagators, propagation cultivator licenses. And essentially it's kind of like a nursery license, so that folks could be doing starts and things and be able to sell those to other licensees who are regulated by the CCB. And so that's in sections 11 and 12. Skip down for the fee for that on page 17. So you see is propagation cultivators are going to be assessed an annual licensing fee of $500. I'll mention the one up above, although
Wait, did we raise that to 50,000?
no, the one above is applying to product manufacturers, and that's just the threshold between tier 1 and tier 2 folks. Is right now your tier 1 if you don't have more than $10,000 in sales.
Okay.
And that's just changing the threshold between the 2 tiers.
Okay.
It's not increasing or changing the fee at all. So the only change here for licensees is for the new propagation cultivators for a $500 fee.
How does that compare with the other? Well, what other fees are compared? Okay.
I think probably either Ted or Brent can speak to how that fits in with the other types of fees. So the next changes are in the medical program. So section 17 deals with the medical program. There is currently a $50 annual registration fee for anyone who is a patient or a caregiver who is supporting a patient. and they're on the registry, and so you see there on the registration piece, and the proposal is that, so there are something called qualifying medical conditions that would enable someone to be on the medical registry. And the way that that works is that there's a list in statute that identifies the types of medical conditions that would qualify. And then in order to be on the registry, an applicant would have their healthcare provider, who they have a really established relationship with, sign a medical verification form saying that they have one of these medical conditions. They're not recommending cannabis, they're not prescribing it or anything. They're just attesting to the fact that the person is their patient and that that person has that qualifying medical condition. And so this proposal is to say that for, instead of doing an annual fee for everyone, that they would continue the annual fee only for folks who are on the registry for chronic pain, which is a substantial number out of the total number. I think there's just under 1,100 people who are on there for chronic pain out of 3,000 and something folks who are on there. Or maybe it's the opposite. I know that's probably Ted's note, but and then for everybody else that has a more kind of chronic long-term condition, they wouldn't have to go through the whole renewal every year and pay that fee. So it would only be, they would only have to do that every 3 years. But the folks who are on there because of chronic pain would still continue to do that annually.
We also have people with PTSD used to have to be under the supervision or care of a psychologist, or it was some
The current law
they had to be
is-
under some treatment.
The
and
current
that's
law for
also-
PTSD is it has an extra hoop that you have to clear in order to be on the registry, that you have to be in psychotherapy.
We can do away with that.
And that is, that PTSD is now, under this proposal, would be on as a qualifying medical condition, but there wouldn't be that extra requirement that they verify that the person is currently in psychotherapy treatment. But that doesn't affect, that's not gonna affect
So
the
what
fees
we're
in any way.
losing then is that $50 a year fee from the people that no longer have to register every year. It only
Right. So
register.
looking at TED, it says approximately 2,500 of the 3,570 patients in the medical program qualify for chronic pain. Oh, so it's the opposite. So the vast majority of people on there are on there for chronic pain. So they would continue to do the annual.
Okay, so this is just a small.
So there would be a remaining 1,070 who fit into the ALS or MS or other qualifying conditions, who would only have to do it every 3 years. He has,
How much is the fee, that registration
it's $50 annually.
and is it scaled to cover the cost of administration of the program? Is that basically how that was set?
It was, I don't know, the latest and how that's all working over there, but initially that was. It used to be when we just had a medical program, and it was regulated by the Department of Public Safety before the Cannabis Control Board was established. The fee has been $50 for a long time, and it also had dispensary fees going into the fund, but the cannabis fund always ran a surplus. Actually, the legislature a couple times borrowed some money out of Woodbury because they would have money sitting in there and they were not using it all for running the program, but it's obviously a very different program now with the CCB.
Okay, well, thanks. It just strikes me that someone with PTSD could see their primary care physician who prescribed something. And you don't have to go register to pick up a drug at the pharmacy. And I'm not sure why we still have these additional burdens for people to manage, but that's a different conversation than the fee level itself.
So, and then the final change around the money issues is at the very end. Actually, I'm gonna mention this. It wasn't in Ted's fiscal note, I don't think, but sections 22 and 23 are amending the definition of tobacco substitute and as well as other tobacco products in the law. And that is done because, and I don't know that I necessarily have all the history of it, but I think there was some confusion after the adult use market came online about whether or not tobacco taxes should apply to cannabis products. That was never the intention. You'll recall all the discussions about,
Taxes,
how,
like alcohol.
right. And so in talking with board, and also I was working with Jen Kirby because she handles tobacco issues, is we thought that the easiest way to kind of just settle this issue, I think according to the original intent of when you passed Act 164, was to just decouple in the definitions here to make it clear that cannabis products are not considered other tobacco substitutes or other tobacco products. So I just mentioned that for you because I know it's been an issue at times. And then section 24, sorry, so back to this little mouse on my laptop. Is that, so there is a cannabis business development fund that is used to help social equity applicants with their license and getting their businesses going. Also provides, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development provides technical assistance as well. And when the legislature set up the fund in 2020, they appropriated $500,000 to that fund. But no kind of recurring appropriation to that fund. And so I just wanted to mention, I know this will be going across the hall, but that there is in section 24, there's $500,000 being transferred from the Cannabis Regulation Fund, which generally is just comprised of fees from licensees. But for FY 24 and 25, the legislature is sending the excise tax to that fund. And that decision has already been made and done, is that, and so this would arguably be coming out of, excise taxes so we transfer it from the Cannabis Regulation Fund to the Cannabis Business Development Fund, and then transfer it from that fund to the Agency of Commerce to fund technical assistance and providing loans to the social equity applicants. Okay.
So,
Are glass pipes made to consume cannabis tax that's tobacco products?
I think that's like one of the conversations that's been going on around the tobacco language, and I think that that's part of why there was an original the bill as introduced and came over from the House. There was something clarifying that you didn't have to have a DLL license in order to sell pipes if you were licensed with the CCB and you also sold pipes. And so I'm not sure what the tax is in terms of what if a dispensary or an adult use retailer sells those.
we let things, because there was an issue with vapes, and that's how some people do medical cannabis. We don't allow vaping for non-medical, or we were taxing it, and.
Yeah, and I don't do the taxes.
Yeah, we had to, when we're doing flavored tobacco, we were exempting flavored cannabis in the dispensary.
Well, tobacco, so in cannabis, so is that the flavor vapes are permitted within the medical program. They are not permitted in the adult use retail market.
I think that may have been, we've had to several times the line between cannabis and tobacco a little.
And we think, we're
Right.
hoping that just decoupling it from those definitions is gonna kind of just make it clear that you're you're making independent decisions. You know, here's what we want to do around taxation of cannabis and cannabis products and things that are sold by licensed retailers and dispensaries. And then here's what we do with tobacco.
So, we didn't understand the answer to it.
The answer is, I don't know.
I understand
So,
that.
sorry, I'm not usually your
Yeah.
fee or tax person, so I'm not sure on glass pipes. I don't know if Bryn knows if it's by a licensee.
Contact probably Abby Shepherd and ask her.
Yes, I think, I remember a ways back when this issue was coming up, it was like Abby, I think, and Becky who were doing that. I think I was tangentially involved, but there were a lot of moving money pieces that.
Your constituent friend, whoever's asking the question, if they sell both cannabis and tobacco, is that allowed?
This guy makes pipes.
Oh, he makes pipes. Well, if he labels them as cannabis pipes, then he's probably safe. If he just lets them go and they could be used for tobacco, he's probably not.
Well, he claims that there's not a demand for smoking tobacco.
Well, no, because you can't get cherry flavored pipe tobacco anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, check with that. Okay, so that's,
I can shoot her an email.
she will be in here sooner rather than later too. Is that it for us? Okay.
That's a quick tax question, since it's been a little while since
You
I've
can
looked at
try.
No, just, it's the only, like, there's that registration card that there's a fee for. Are there, in the medical marijuana program, are there other fees that people who are participants be assessed?
No, I mean, one of the advantages for being on the registry when there's now adult use, because so if you're 21 years older, you can, walk into the store across from City Hall here. So why would somebody choose to do the medical? And one of the reasons is that cannabis and cannabis products are not taxed for medical patients. So if you receive those from a dispensary, they're not. So there's the $50 fee, but I don't believe that there's any other cost to the patient for being on the registry. They need to see the doctor to have an appointment to get the medical verification form, but we assume they're doing that anyway.
Okay. Thanks, right, and I guess now that the regulated adult use market is also tested, quantified, and all the rest, you could choose a comparable product from a dispensary or a store.
You could, but I think that one of the reasons, so the legislature, when you adopted the 2020 legislation, you put in some legislative intent around that it's a policy decision by the General Assembly that you wanted to maintain the medical program because it offered products and services to patients that are not available in the adult use market, either because they're banned on the adult use market. So it might be a certain type of cannabis concentrate where you have a cap on the THC concentrates in the adult use, but there's not that similar cap in the medical. So somebody might need something stronger. There are also, and then Bryn can talk about this better than I can, but in terms of the retail market and what people are looking for in the retail market can be very different than what someone who was looking to buy cannabis to alleviate their symptoms. And so the concern is that if you just kind of leave it to the adult use market, then perhaps patients won't be able to find the types of products that the dispensaries uniquely offer.
Any other questions for Michelle? Okay, thank you. Ed is not going to be here for a couple of minutes. I'm going on to Jeffrey
Is on Zoom.
is on Zoom. Is Jeffrey gonna come up? Oh, there he is. Okay, so introduce yourself for the record. Welcome to Senate Finance, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. I apologize I can't be there in person today. My colleague Graham from rural Vermont will be speaking after me. He is there, and I hope everyone is very well. I submitted written testimony, which you should have. So I'm just going to read that. My remarks are brief, and I'll pause, and I would love to, be used as a resource. Happy to respond to questions, not just about 270, but cannabis in general or this market. And that's how I'll proceed. So I'll start with my testimony.
Okay.
Excellent. So for the record, my name is Jeffrey Pizzatello. I am a longtime indoor natural cannabis farmer and the co-founder and executive director of Vermont Growers Association. We're the state's cannabis trade association for this emerging market. VGA formed in 2019 as a member-based nonprofit, and though we have growers in our name, we represent the entire supply chain with nearly 80 members to date, which we're very proud of. And that includes retailers, cultivators, manufacturers, all businesses, including non-plant touching businesses that service and provide support for the adult use cannabis market, such as security companies. VGA is also a founding member of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, which includes the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, Green Mountain Patients Alliance, NOFA Vermont, and Rural Vermont. Collectively, the coalition serves and represents, and we feel like this is very important, the communities in Vermont that are most impacted and have the greatest stake in not just the adult use, but also the medical cannabis markets in this state. That's what our coalition represents. And today I will be testifying as a member of that coalition and also for some issues as Vermont Growers Association independently. And I'll touch upon that later on. Moving on. So, to date, this year, together with our coalition, we have been in several committees in both chambers working on all different aspects of Bill H-270. Today, however, I'm here to express support for the Senate Committee on Agriculture's amendment, which is the language expanding the agricultural regulations as defined in Act 158, 2022, to outdoor cannabis growers, and also to request the committee consider just a couple additional housekeeping items for inclusion in this bill. Again, these additional requests we view as housekeeping measures and appropriate for consideration, and we appreciate you considering them. So moving on to our support for the Ag Amendment. To start with, I'll share that there are nearly 400 approved cannabis licenses from the Cannabis Control Board to date. Of those nearly 400, about 300 of them are cultivators, and a majority of those 300 cultivators are outdoor growers. The issues addressed in the Senate Committee on Agriculture's amendment to Bill 270 are significant. These changes will improve the everyday lives of many small farms currently licensed to operate in this new market. Not just that, but those that aspire to join the regulated market. And then thirdly, which we think is equally important, this language also brings much needed clarity to municipalities. We hear from towns across Vermont that are looking for clearness when it comes to jurisdictional matters concerning outdoor growers. And this bill brings change to that issue. It is also important to highlight for this committee that this language from Senate Agriculture has earned the support of the Cannabis Control Board, which acknowledges that the material impact these policies will have on Vermonters as well as localities navigating this nascent market. So really, this language is a win-win across the board.
Okay, we're looking only at the fee and tax language. So if you can focus on that, that's most helpful to this committee.
Certainly, and I appreciate that, Chair. My remaining remarks are brief, and the couple other items that I have to speak to do regard monies and funding. And they are the additional asks that we would ask this committee to consider. So the first item is we are seeking you consider devoting 10% of the cannabis excise tax revenue to the Cannabis Business Development Fund. This is an issue, if you recall, Chair, that came up in Senate Economic Development the other week. And in addition to that 10%, we're asking that 20% of the cannabis excise tax revenue be devoted to a community reinvestment fund that is administered by members in those communities. And I just want to share, most states with adult use cannabis marketplaces devote a portion of their excise tax to equity, whereas in Vermont, we're currently devoting 0. So we feel like this is an important matter. And I just want to emphasize that the Cannabis Control Board supports these policies and in fact has included them in their January 15th of this year legislative report to the General Assembly. And I did submit the CCB's legislative report, January 15th legislative report, to this committee. And the passage that I want to just share with this committee is the CCB writes in their legislative report, quote, "The Cannabis Business Development Fund is inadequately funded to provide meaningful economic opportunities to social equity applicants and businesses. The board recommends that a portion of the excise tax revenue be set aside as financial resources for social equity applicants and licensees to ensure their access to and success in this new industry."
And that's in addition to the 500,000 that's being appropriated?
This would be, thank you for asking, that's a good question. This would be in place of. That was, I believe, could be characterized as a compromise for these more devoted perennial funds that we're seeking.
Okay. I know there's a portion of the excise tax that is going to prevention, primarily after school programs. Do you have any, would this impact that funding?
That's a good question. What we're asking is, without impacting necessarily or diminishing that fund, what we're asking is taking that 14% excise tax and devoting a portion of that 14% and devoting a portion of that to social equity on an ongoing basis. And currently that is not in law. And so other states do this. This is becoming the status quo. And we're just asking that Vermont revisit this conversation if this committee would consider it and make that a devoted perennial funding.
Okay.
Can I just want to clarify? So there's a 14% excise tax and that goes to general fund, but there's 20% for substance misuse prevention.
Right.
That, and then the 6% sales tax is for, I think, what you're thinking around the after school
Right.
programming, things
So
like
it is
that.
the sales tax.
It's the sales tax, it's for that, and then there's
Okay.
20% of the excise tax, which
Goes,
30? 30, oh, it's 30.
Okay.
All right, I thought it was 20.
okay. Okay, so this would essentially take up a good portion of what is not dedicated, all right. And
I'm sorry.
talk about impacted communities. Is that on a national scale or do you have to watch that?
There was some noise and I did not catch that entire question. I apologize, Chair.
When you talk about impacted communities and dedicating, 10%. All total, 30% of the excise tax. Are you talking about communities that have been impacted on a national level, or have you got specific Vermont data as to what communities have been impacted and how much?
That's a good question. I know that a lot of this language came from a previous bill, which is H414, and I'll also add to respond that some of this language also resides within S127. So we would urge that we look at that language and carry some of that language into 270. So that's what we're asking. Some of this language is already in legislation, and then we believe that would be the start of that conversation.
It's in legislation, but not law at this point.
Correct.
127 went through economic development.
I'm not sure if S27, 127 was taken off the wall, but I do know that Tanya was working on that.
All right. Okay,
Excellent. So just to conclude that, again, language for those policies, social equity and community reinvestment. We do ask that you turn to S127 and then you consider including that in 270. We think it is understanding we're sort of in the ninth inning here. We do believe, we just want to stress that these sorts of funding and reinvestment we view, even though it may be significant policy, as a housekeeping measure, things that we should have done in the past so that should be enacted now. And other states are passing us by when it comes to this policy. So we just ask that we bring Vermont up to that level of commitment. Thank you. And then,
Okay.
yep.
I've only got my fiscal staff here for a while, so I'm trying to keep things on track and focus, so. Any more fiscal area?
Yeah, and just to conclude, we are making one additional ask with regards to money. And just very briefly, this is regards to product registration. And I appreciate your time listening on this important issue. So product registration, what is that? Every cannabis product destined for the regulated market here in Vermont must first get registered and approved by the Cannabis Control Board. Vermont's adult use cannabis marketplace has a mandated product registration process, which in theory is a great idea. However, the wait time to register a product is taking too long and it is causing harm to licensed farms and businesses. It's impacting consumer selection, it's impacting revenue, and the overall competitiveness of Vermont's cannabis marketplace. Other states allow licensees to bring a product to market immediately upon registration. However, in Vermont, licensees must first gain approval from the agency, and that approval process, and I want to stress this, that approval process, licensees are telling us, is taking 14 to 75 days. 14 to 75 days. So we're talking months here. And I want to underscore, this issue is not a criticism of the agency at all. The CCB does good work. This exorbitantly long wait time for product registration is simply a staffing issue. It's specifically a staffing issue in the CCB's licensing department. They handle product registration. So I'm asking for this committee, and this is not, I want to be clear, this is not a coalition ask, this is a Vermont Growers Association ask. So this is very significant to the current market and licensees right now. This is a fire that's currently burning. And we are asking that this committee consider appropriations for 2 more staff members for the CCB to bring its licensing department to a level that's functional for the market. So again, I'm asking you to consider appropriations for 2 full-time positions for the Cannabis Control Board's licensing department. And I'll end there.
Not appropriated in this committee, so that will have to wait until this bill or similar bill goes to appropriations. That's in the budget, it's presently in conference, so I don't know what kind of a chance there is this year. Senator Gray, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick clarifying question. Is registration only, passing along information about the product, or does registration involve some sort of assessment of the product by someone for purity or levels of cannabinoids, or so is it like testing is part of it, or is it just simply, name, rank, and serial number of the product?
Thanks for that question. That's a great question. So what is asked, what is the product registration process, to break that down a little bit? So at that point in time, testing is complete, the labeling is done, the packaging is complete. It is really the final product. Think of it as the last step to bring a final product to market. So all of those dots all those I's are dotted, those T's are crossed. However, those criteria, the testing lab results, the packaging, all of those areas of compliance need to be vetted by the agency prior to bringing that product to market. We think that's a reasonable step. It's just not being, it's taking way too long. And cannabis, just to keep in mind, is an agricultural commodity. It has a shelf life. So when I say things like this is impacting revenue and consumer selection, what that means is some licensees are determining that this process is taking too long for them to bring certain products to market. So it's impacting the business decisions of these licensees, and ultimately it's impacting the entire supply chain. Hope that answers your question.
But doing this kind of appropriation, we can't do right now. I've got one more witness and Ted needs to leave for another committee, so I think you've walked us through what you would like to see. And I'm not sure how much of it we have the power to do, but I think maybe we will have Ted come up and walk us through the fiscal impacts of what's here.
Great.
And then if we have time, maybe Bryn could, if she has anything she can add to this discussion, and I have Graham Rupinath, I'm gonna massacre.
Your name's It's okay, you have it.
Thank you for your time, committee. I appreciate it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Ted, go back up there, all right.
All right, for the record, Ted Barnett, Joint Fiscal Office. For H270 as amended by Senate Economic Development, there are two relatively small, but fiscal impacts I want to talk about, and then talk a little bit about the changes that would extend some of the provisions that were offered to small outdoor cultivators, and would extend it to all outdoor cultivators, and just clarify that we looked into that to really assess the fiscal impact. So to start, in fiscal year 2024, we are anticipating a decrease in special fund revenue of $35,000. That is the provision that would allow people who are a patient, a medical patient, to renew. These are for folks who are qualify for conditions that aren't chronic pain. They would be able to renew their cards once every 3 years as opposed to once every 1 year. That fee is $50. So if you do the math based on the number of patients, that is a decrease in revenue of $35,000 in fiscal year 2024. And then in fiscal year 2025 and future years, a new propagator license is anticipated to come online. And that starts in fiscal year 25, and so that increases revenue by $50,000, and so the net in fiscal years 25 and beyond is $15,000. That's kind of in the straight fiscal impact side. We did consider in section 6. Section 6 of this bill specifies that outdoor cannabis cultivation are regulated as farming for permitting processes. And that all outdoor cannabis cultivators would be eligible for the use value appraisal program and certain agricultural sales tax exemptions. Previously, this provision had only applied to small cultivators with less than 1,000 square feet of cultivated space. Looking at that, I went to the Act 250 database. There have been no Act 250 permits issued for outdoor cultivation. There have been some for indoor, so this wouldn't have any sort of fiscal impact on permitting revenues. To move to the use value appraisal program, the total amount of outdoor licensed space that this would apply to by expanding the eligibility for this program is about 8 acres. So again, a very small amount of kind of space, acreage that could enter the use value appraisal program, and so the associated cost of the education fund is pretty minimal here. And then finally, expanding the agricultural sales tax exemption for certain agricultural inputs, machinery, and compost purchase in bulk. The expansion of that to all outdoor cannabis cultivators, we're anticipating a cost of $40,000 as a sales tax expenditure. However, within kind of the general scope of the education fund, that is considered a de minimis impact.
I think I keep underlining the word de minimis.
Yes, for all of these.
What point do all the de minimises add up to?
Yes, but I did want to flag because it does come up when you're
Yeah.
talking about expanding the use value appraisal program. It kind of flags for folks there might be something here, and we dotted our I's and crossed our
It
T's
is
on
a
it.
half an acre, so unless you are getting very rich on a half an acre of cannabis to meet the criteria to be agriculture, you're going to have to be doing something else, or you're going to have to be actively logging or forestry.
Right, and it would be, in this part, it would be expanding the part that's actively used for cannabis agriculture, which is just, the maximum
Might have been
license.
corn or tomatoes last year, or maybe a chicken coop, but probably not. It would be very hard to get in with just a half acre cannabis as your product.
That would be my understanding, yes.
Okay, questions from Ken?
So, increased revenue, increased caregiver registration cards, minus 35K. And I'm just trying to see that in the bill. I see, for instance, in section 955 registration fees, sub B, it just lists a $50 registration renewal fee. But I'm not sure where it's being struck elsewhere or altered. I don't know why it's in essence going.
So that is in section 17, the provision that qualifies certain folks to renew their license every 3 years. I don't have the bill in front of me to show where that language is, but I could.
They only have to do it every
It's
3
in,
now.
it's still the same section, so if you're looking at page 21, 7 VSA 955, registration fees, subsection A talks about who has to renew annually and who has to renew every 3 years, and then you'll see the fee, which is the current fee in subsection B.
Thank you.
But the vast majority will still be coming. The vast majority are there for chronic pain. Chronic pain has to come every year. It's the folks with the chronic conditions. I think MS was on there, it's in it, Garrett's, ALS, I guess that is. There's
I can tell you, there's, so currently qualifying medical condition means cancer, MS, positive test for HIV, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, glaucoma, Crohn's disease, Parkinson's disease, PTSD, or the treatment of these conditions. And then there's, and then the other one is a disease or medical condition or its treatment that is chronic, debilitating, and produces one or more of the following intractable symptoms. Can't ever say this. Cachexia or wasting syndrome, chronic pain, severe nausea, or seizures. And so the chronic pain is being singled out for that being the one that has to continue to renew annually.
With the child with the seizures that had to go to Colorado, right, and stay here.
So, yeah, I don't, it's a policy decision comes out of the committee and I don't know it well enough. It just strikes me when I hear that list and see that we're talking about using this product for its medicinal properties, that I just can't think of any other way in which we ask someone to pay a special fee to have access to a medication. And it seems, I get, you might say, well, there's a program that there's overhead and we're just recovering the cost and passing out registration fees, but there's a lot of really horrific conditions that people are qualifying under. And the idea that you need to go through an extra step and pay for the card seems to be
There is in
ungenerous.
this bill, I think part of the problem is the cannabis has not been defined as, because you haven't been able to experiment as to, the scientific studies and the CDC and the whole kind of battery of tests that other medications would be through. But isn't it in this bill that there will be, is it this one or one of the other ones came out of Health and Welfare, that there is a study?
There's a study in
It's
here.
in here.
I mean, it's still, cannabis is a Schedule I drug
Right.
under the Controlled Substances Act. And so, it's not something that can be prescribed through the normal channels and things like that. And so the fee has existed since you've had a registry in 2004, and that fee was used to support the management of the registry.
And
You're right, it's just a
study
policy decision for you about whether or not.
is meant to start collecting data. Health and Welfare Committee loves data. But collecting data on what it is used for, what it works for, and starting to to get a better handle on this. Right now, I think it's, people say it helps, and so it helps. But we haven't really studied it. So we're starting that.
Well, okay, so this is, we're in policy territory, but there's a very straight money connection there. And, I don't know what the schedule is for voting this out.
I
but
would like
love
to get it out today or tomorrow.
I'm not surprised, makes sense. I would just like to better understand, I get when we first stood it up and it was a standalone community program. But now there's a much larger program in the state with sizable revenues, and to somehow not be able to, if we're looking at supporting the creation of additional businesses, for instance, if I had to prioritize, I would be prioritizing support for existing patients of the medicinal program before I would want to start spending money on additional new businesses.
But Senator, we have 9 days
I
left,
know.
and this is a housekeeping bill.
It's.
Good. Work on it for next year and get it through the process, because this would automatically send it back through the process. Every committee that's touched it would need to touch it again. They wouldn't be happy with us. So, but next year is another,
They might not be happy, or they might love it and just go right on. But I get that, I take your point.
okay. Any other questions for Ted? Let him go. I get a chance to take a deep breath before hitting the next committee. Okay, thank you. So basically, this is de minimis impacts
Yes.
as it comes to us.
Correct, yes. The only thing is the $35,000 kind of special fund revenue loss. That one we calculated because within the context of the control board's budget, it's a little bit different than the size of the education fund.
That's right, this is the sales tax. All right. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay. Right. Lee, I'm trying to grab a few minutes, and we only have our next witness for 15 minutes. But we have the bribery suspension bill, license suspended, has come back. There have been other fees for victim services attached to marriage licenses, which have been attached to the driver's licenses. Senator Sears, I've already been gotten by lobbyists and Senator Sears in the hall today, but we're gonna take a look at that and just,
When is that? Because that's actually me. I mean, it's Anthea, but I'm on the marriage fees. Are you doing that next?
oh, are you doing, can you do the marriage fees?
I can talk about marriage, yeah.
Okay, good.
Right now?
We got one more witness and then I'm trying to squeeze.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to squeeze marriage in between candidates and liquor, you know how that goes. All right.
It's a very interesting committee. Graham Eubanks-Ruffenach, I'm the policy director at Rural Vermont. Thank you all for having me in today. And I don't think I'm going to take much of your time based on the conversation thus far. Some of you are familiar with myself and our organization. I submitted testimony, but briefly, Rural Vermont was founded in 1985. We are a statewide member-based farmer worker-led nonprofit organization based in Montpelier, primarily local and state levels, but we also advocate and collaborate in national and international spaces. I'm our liaison with the National Family Farm Coalition and sit on their executive council. We also are one of the only members of North America of La Via Campesina, which is one of the largest social movement organizations in the world. You might see our legislative director, Caroline Gordon, around the State House, but in general, our mission is to organize, educate, and advocate in collaboration with local and global movements to strengthen the social, ecological, and economic health of the agrarian communities that connect us all. And, as Jeffrey mentioned, I'm here also as an organizational rep for the Cannabis Equity Coalition. He mentioned the organizations that are part of that. But I'm really here today. I wanted to just be here when this bill is presented to committee to see if there are any questions, in particular on the agricultural pieces. That's sort of in particular where Rural Vermont's expertise lays in our coalition. And I haven't heard any come up, but I'd be happy to take any. These have been recommendations that we've been advocating for since prior to the regulated market in Vermont, just to ensure that farmers and people who want to become farmers maybe have access to what will potentially be one of the higher value crops we have in the state. And currently there are a lot of federal barriers and state barriers preventing that. I can go into stories. Otherwise, I don't think we need to based on what I've heard here today. I think the main thing I want to emphasize is what Jeffrey brought to the table around the possibility of creating a fund from the excise tax, which is administered by communities who have been directly impacted by criminalization over the years. I can look for data directly on Vermont. We have very compelling national data, and I have spoken to many people who have faced very extreme hardship based on some of the consequences of how they've been wound up in the Vermont criminal justice system from people whose farms have been seized or no longer have their farms, people who were taken out of their families as children when their families were found to be cultivating or put in foster care and even abused in those situations. So clearly the criminalization has led to a lot of, ideally, what I'd like to characterize.
Yeah, but this talks about classes of people, and I'm just wondering if there are certain groups of people. College students have definitely been impacted, but I don't know if they're a class.
So we just disaggregate that data.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to figure out.
We can certainly look into that. I know you all are on committees, and many of you who look at similar data for different aspects of Vermont. So that's the primary thing I think this committee needs to consider. And as you mentioned, I think coming back, we will come back next year, the coalition, and there is word on having a more substantive bill next year, which will make more transformational changes to the program. I just want to briefly also address just the medical stuff that you brought up, Senator Ray. I would just invite you to speak to the Green Mountain Patients Alliance. They're a member of our coalition. They did not get time in Senate Health and Welfare this time around, but we certainly hope for them to get time here, and they'd love to speak to more people. And next year we hope to come back with more substantive changes, addressing some concerns like what you brought up. And in terms of just that excise tax, the question came up, will we be wanting to taking it from the prevention or from anything else? And our goal isn't to have a competition around this money. It's just to make sure that it goes to the appropriate places where it can be most impactful and hope to remedy some of the harms that have been caused. And really that reinvestment in communities, whether that's housing, whether that's childcare, whether that's after school programming, is all prevention work. I come from a family of social workers. I've worked in social work. I've worked with 24-month-olds to 21-year-olds when they age out of the system. And what the main thing we're taught is that prohibition is primarily not an effective tool. We need prevention in a way that is holistic, which gives people opportunities, which brings them joy, which brings them connection to one another, to their localities, to their communities. And I think the social equity funding of this sort is also a form of prevention funding that really gets to the root causes of poverty in our communities.
Right now it goes to the general fund, so it is available for many programs. And I believe the 500,000 did go through there this year. The additional,
The 500,000.
that's in this bill, that got accounted for in the budget,
From the
right?
general fund, yeah.
Yeah, from the general fund.
For the prior year, yes, for
Yes,
the next year.
the first 500,000, there's an additional 500 in here. I'm assuming since all committee chairs had to report their asks to appropriation weeks ago, that money has been accounted for.
It's coming out of the cannabis regulation fund, which is where the cannabis excise tax revenue is going starting in
Okay.
fiscal year 24,
So the excise tax money is going into the cannabis regulation.
starting in FY 24.
Okay,
For 2 years.
For 2 years.
yeah, okay,
Normally it goes to general fund.
okay, because the general fund has been upfronting startup money. Right, okay. But in general, that's where it's going. All
I
right.
have a question for Bryn, sorry, for the conversation. Is there a document you can refer me to that lays out sort of the finance, like the tax schedule and where the money's going?
I can send you that.
That'd be great.
Okay, might be good if we all start. We don't go in cannabis. Nothing in the cannabis will go through this committee, so.
I believe that's it. Just,
Okay.
here's a resource. I appreciate you all having me today, and it sounds like really focusing on the financial aspects and moving this along.
Thank you.
With that, was it Vermont Patients Alliance?
Green Mountain Patients Alliance. I'm happy to send you some contacts for those links as well. But
So, Senator Cummings, did you guys call Anthea for 53? She said 53 is her bill. I just know
We
something.
have, no, we are trying. Sears got me in the lunch line.
Okay.
So
I can just tell you a
very
little
quick
bit, it's
one.
just not my bill.
I'm really
but-
looking, I went through who testified, it looks like Crime Victim Services, and we're
Sure.
trying to get their rep just to tell us, and I will say, you were here. There was a time, many years ago, when putting a $50 surcharge on a traffic ticket was the thing to do. People stopped being able to pay their traffic tickets. And I'm a little leery of starting to attach fees. I suppose you can find a connection between crime victim, is it Crime Victim Services that was in?
Right, so,
And
Right.
marriage licenses, but I'm straining a little bit. It's not an obvious.
right, so what I will explain here, so for the record, Michelle Childs, Office of Legislative Counsel, and I am looking at the House proposal amendment to the Senate proposal amendment to H53.
Have we got that? We do not have that.
Okay.
We do not have possession of the bill, but Senator Sears feels it is definitely in our territory, not his, and would like us.
Right, and so you should probably have scheduled Anthea to talk to you about the amendment as a whole, but I can, let me go on and I'll share my screen here so you can see it.
15 minutes sometime.
Um, Are we in the Zoom room? Oh, sure.
But maybe you can just tell us.
I think I've got it. Sorry. Well, I'll walk you through all this.
So you, I mean,
Okay.
so we should
So
be able to get.
just conceptually, so in H53, amending the language around suspension of driver's licenses, and solely for the non-payment of a civil penalty for a traffic ticket. And as the chair mentioned, you've been moving away from doing that because it was a lot of people were defaulting, not paying those. And then it was just snowballing, and then you wound up with more and more people having suspended license and driving on a suspended license and getting multiples. And so for the last few years, you've been kind of moving away from that. And so that created a hole in the funds going towards the domestic and violence fund. And so what they did on the House side was looking for ways to replenish those funds so that it wouldn't be a net decrease to the fund. And so in current law, under Title 18, under the provision for obtaining a marriage license, you go to the town clerk and you pay a fee to get a marriage license. The current fee for a marriage license is $60. $10 of that goes to the town clerk. $35 of that goes to the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund currently.
I remember adding that to the marriage.
Correct. And then $15 it goes to the general fund. And so what the proposal coming over from the House would be increasing the marriage license fee from $60 to $80. I think when I looked at it, it was maybe last raised maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. So it hasn't been particularly
That's like most fees.
recently that's been increased. And so out of that $80, so it goes from 60 to 80. And then the amount retained by the town clerk goes from $10 to $15, so they get an extra $5. And then the amount of money that goes to the fund goes from $35 to $50.
Okay,
Does anyone offer a rationale for these? I mean, someone said we need more money in that fund.
Well, the fund, and I think you'll hear from this, from the folks, from the advocates about that these funds have been dwindling because of criminal justice policy decisions made by this body in terms of whether it's decriminalizing things or saying we're not going to be assessing extra surcharges, or we're trying to get the numbers down of certain tickets and things like that. And so they've seen the money in the special fund decrease. And so they're looking for other avenues to be able to make sure that they have the funds. So I know this is a part of a larger discussion. This was something that I think came out of a JFO report last year or the year before. I think there is a fiscal note on this.
and when the report was on that fund though, I'm having, that fund needs money. I'm having trouble. I have a feeling if we look, the number of marriage licenses is also down. I'm just having the struggle why we're charging people trying to get married to pay for domestic abuse. Maybe.
If that were a motion, I'd be seconding. Yeah, it seems like a very, I don't know, tangentially related thing, marriage and.
I don't think that they're trying to
No.
make a connotation between the two. I think it was that because money currently comes from marriages licenses
Just raise.
towards that, as they just were looking at a way to do a small increase so that to try to make up for some of the money that
Yeah.
is not coming in any longer from other sources. But I understand it's a much bigger conversation, and I think you'll have that when you have Jen Pullman in and you have Ted to the fiscal note, so he can talk to you about that. And the fiscal note should be up on House Ways and Means webpage for when they took testimony on this. I believe.
Okay, so we will have to pay. Schedule more testimony. It just seems like this is not the appropriate place to stick that.
Yeah, it's sort of a hard, I know why someone might say, oh, they're related, but I don't know the percentage of domestic abuse, for instance.
I don't think anybody's been asserting that. I think it's just that money currently goes to that fund from these
Well,
fees
I
now.
was on
So
a
they were just
speeding,
looking to
yeah.
see if it's gonna decrease from one place, should we
It was
increase
on
it in
speeding
another?
tickets before. I mean, it was, it was a way to raise money. I probably during the Great Recession, when we didn't have a lot of money. And it was a way to raise money without spending general fund and asking for an appropriation or without having to raise the tax. Thank you.
Sure.
You moved us forward.
Did you get divorced?
Yeah.
Maybe we should put a surcharge on divorces. We want to discourage divorces, right? Not marriages.
I'm supportive of that, but I also think there's a stronger argument for taking from cannabis or alcohol, just because my naive impression is domestic violence usually is related to alcohol, drug consumption, and excess. But I see your point.
But all of those are, I guess to me, to stick this on a driving suspended license bill is tangentially germane, maybe, but,
Because married people drive.
well, because a fee is a fee, but to have it come this late in the session when you really don't have time.
Unmarried people have this violence issues.
Yes, they do.
Like it's not, to what degree is it the responsibility of the married individuals to fund a program that affects all domestic abuse?
They think we should have a fee for dating.
Dating,
Dating,
your tax dating apps.
yeah, dating apps, there you go.
Dating app.
Okay,
Special
I mean-
fee if you're post-date.
okay, I mean, I don't want to see this, the bill get bogged down, but I think we need to spend a little time on it. Just because we did this, and I'm sure it was during the recession, and it was a way to get money to good organizations without taking it from somebody else or raising a tax. And I'm a little leery of doing it again.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a fundraiser for women's safe back home. I'm entirely supportive of the effort. What's strange to me, I wasn't aware that we were bringing up marriage licenses.
Yes,
And then the further increase, it just stretches the weirdness of it even further. I think there'll be many other ways to fund it that will be appropriate.
you got the, I got one of these.
I mean, it's like a discouragement
How many is it?
fee.
Next question.
No one would make the choice
Take this
based on
with
the
us.
marriage license fee, but it's such an odd moment in time to say, oh, well, while you're getting your license, let's have you pay this other program.
It's a little different. Keisha, you're with us.
Yes, here I am. Sorry, I might be in and out in case I'm off video. I might be doing something else, but if I didn't miss something, it sounded like a piece of this goes to the general fund, but we're not maybe just requesting that some of the money that goes to the general fund instead goes to the special fund. Did I miss like a piece on?
We're raising it from $50 to $80. We're giving an extra $5 to the town clerks. And then the rest of it goes to I think it's the Committee on Sexual Violence. The question, I mean, it's been tacked on the driver's license suspension bill, so and we can't talk about it because our next witness is only available from 2:45 to 3 o'clock.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we have to move
Okay.
on, but
We had Michelle, and I literally got this in the lunch line from Senator Sears, so we're trying to, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
We're trying to get witnesses and find out what's going on along with getting everything else out.
okay. I just didn't know if the money could come from what goes to the general fund instead of,
It could, but that would impact the budget that's already been voted.
Do we know how
Maybe
much money
next
we're
week.
talking about? all
No, we don't know anything. Just that it came back on the bill, so we're trying to do a really quick study on it. Okay, so is our next witness in the waiting? Yeah. All right, and Jen is here, but I think just from passing conversations, our witness is here, which is Cody Thomas Rounds. Mr. Rounds, welcome to Senate Finance, and we just asked you to introduce yourself for the record and then tell us what your concern is with this bill.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, I'm Cody Thomas Rounds. I'm a psychologist in Burlington, Vermont. My husband's a big fan of Veep and The West Wing, so he's thrilled to have me here. And I want to thank Senator Chinnan for offering me the invite. I'm here to talk about the SIPAC bill, specifically how this bill could potentially impact the master psychologists. would you feel like I should continue, or I wasn't sure if there's another procedural
If
moment?
it's impact, if it's having added have master psychologists added to the compact, that we can't do.
Yeah, so I think that, then just to give my testimony and kind of the 2 cents for it, I understand that everyone who's coming to the table on this is looking to advance the field of psychological practitioners. I was tapped in this because there were a number of psychologists who were unawares that this was going through, but also specifically were unawares that this was creating a division within the field of psychology. So as you probably know, in Vermont, there are both master psychologists as well as doctorate psychologists. Under the Vermont rules, we all complete the same number of hours of supervision, the same doctorate exam, and we're held to the same accountability of the Board of Psychological Examiners. There hasn't been in the history of Vermont insertion of a division, what would make 2 separate classes of psychologists until the introduction of this bill. And that is kind of one of the broader concerns. By excluding master psychologists, there's a concern from multiple fronts, but that it's one, going to create a division within the field of psychology as a whole, but 2 is that the proposition of this was advanced really without the say of those who would be impacted. So checking with the Office of Professional Regulation and the VPA, over a third of the clinicians in Vermont are master psychologists. So this is not a small portion of people who will be impacted by this potentially. The thing that really wanted to be asserted here is that master psychologists are small business owners. Over 55% of the mental health care in Vermont is provided by single employed small business owners in their single offices. And we have suffered with reduced rates, reimbursements, and inflation. Now, with this, there could be more care coming into Vermont, specifically remote care. But the question is that when we look at Vermont as a whole and what's best for Vermont, does shopping out our mental health care to remote services really favor us in the long run? The major concerns here are, what are the economic impacts going to be specifically to master psychologists as small business owners, but also what is the longer term effect of kind of the incentivization of getting people involved in the mental health field here in Vermont. So as you probably know, there's only one doctorate program in Vermont, and that's UVM, where I interned. And they graduate only 1 or 2 clinical psychologists every year, or even every other year, compared to St. Michael's College, which is the only master's psychological program in Vermont, which is dozens of psychologists every year. So there is no homegrown doctorate psychologist in Vermont. And so when the introduction of a bill like this, it seems like Vermont could be turning its back on its only psychological program of note that is serving the majority of the community.
Senator Chipman, you have a
So thank you for chiming in, Cody, and I think committee will remember that this is the one that doesn't allow us to charge a privilege fee. So this is the one that will pay $10 per licensee for, I don't know, $1,000 a year. We can't collect that money back, and it will have additional impacts. But I don't know if Jennifer Carvey, who's in the room, can answer this question, but if we go into this compact, would that prevent us from continuing to license here in the state master's level psychologists? No, is that?
Jen Carvey, legislative council. No, but the state would still be able to license master's level. It doesn't change anything about our ability to license providers to practice in Vermont. They just wouldn't be able to join the this compact because of the way it's set up is only for doctoral level. So that's for practicing out into other states.
So nothing contemplated in this bill is going to prevent the continued licensure of master's level Vermont practitioners here.
Right. And we have Vermont, we're in the process of standing up a telehealth licensure and registration system where out-of-state providers, not just doctoral level, but master's level providers would also be able to get a telehealth license and provide telehealth care.
If the chair would allow me to bring it back to Cody, hearing that, Cody, I understand you're concerned about division within the field, and that's a larger conversation at the national level for this compact. But are you less concerned about this, knowing that Vermont will continue to be able to and will continue to license master's level psychologists here in the state?
Not necessarily, because of a few things. So the PSI itself is not necessary. So just taking as an example, Florida has a very generous and open interstate agreement in terms of allowing licensure, long-term licensure, even though that, which is even broader and more open than PSI rules. But they do it in a way that withholds the state interest in this. And so when I say, you know, the division within the field, I mean the division within the board. This is actually a state issue, not merely saying a VPA issue, because you now have two dueling kind of levels of psychologists at the board, where one is clearly, quote, better than the other, as it been granted privileges that the other hasn't. And so this is going to be something that the board's going to have to contend with, but also it's going to de-incentivize people to enroll in psychological programs. Potentially. And also, no one has answered what the economic impact here is. When I proposed what is the economic impact, just as a, you know, just to find out, there was no answer from the VPA nor PSI on what it was. What they said was it's kind of good for all. And there wasn't really an explanation how this trickle down effect was really going to come down and benefit master psychologists. It wasn't outlaid. And just to point out that Vermont is unique, other than West Virginia, in the nation by truly honoring master psychologists. So the ramifications of what PSI will do in the state in terms of economic impact to these small business owners, as well as the division within the board and the rules, is unknown. And I am unawares, at least in my asking, of any results in terms of facts of finding that were found to ameliorate that.
Senator Gray.
So, this is the challenge at the end of the year, things come flying in.
Yes.
Is there a PSI version that includes, this is a question for Ms. Harvey, the master's level psychologists? Like, is the one that includes doctorate of psychology just one, but there is another for?
I would have to look, I'm not specific, but you know, there are a number of different ones in the mental health field that I think have been coming through here. But I'm not sure what the educational or training requirements are on those or on others.
Okay. And can you say a little more about other, like?
Yeah, the witness.
Telehealth.
Oh, sorry, no, I don't know if I do know. But, you know, so there are some PACs that do exist for mental health counselors. I think what's, you know, being touched upon here is that there's a broader systemic question here, which is how does Vermont increase homegrown psychologists, or how does it increase homegrown mental health clinicians in general, which, you know, with the PSI is kind of putting the cart before the horse. It answers what seems to be an immediate problem of how can we flood the market with more psychologists, but doesn't answer the longer term questions.
Well, so I'm actually, I appreciate you bringing forward the business side of things. Obviously, you've spent a lot of time and care getting educated and setting up a good practice. I'm also thinking, though, to what degree does the compact make health care available to Vermonters that they might not otherwise be able to obtain? Not every practitioner is equal. They have different programs, different different expertise, different training, different sort of I don't know if there's sub-licenses, but I'm just, I'm interested in patients having as broad an access as possible to the practitioner of choice, regardless of their location. So that's, to me, the attraction of such a compact.
And I think the Health and Welfare Committee, that's what they've looked at. They have determined that it is in the best interest of Vermont's population to have the greater impact. I think if there was a compact that had all levels of degrees, then we'd join that, but there isn't. And you know, that's a rule. You either join the compact or you don't. You can't join the compact and say, but we're going to amend your laws. Vermont's going to allow master's levels. It's like joining the military. You can't set those conditions. You can work as a member of the board to expand their, you know, purview and ask them to do it. But if, in fact, Vermont and West Virginia are the states that allow the most leeway for master's level psychologists, might have some groundwork to get done at that level.
So Ms. Harvey, you were referring to telehealth, telemedicine provisions. Do you know if what's in development and whether or not a psychologist with a master's level degree in Vermont through a telemedicine program might be able to see patients outside of Vermont?
All that Vermont can address through our licensure laws is what providers can see patients who are physically located in Vermont. So we cannot provide on our own a license that allows Vermont providers to see patients who are located in other states.
Okay.
Right.
Well, so I just want to look and see if there's any way we legitimately say we may be opening opportunities for Vermont practitioners. I don't know if those conversations are going on with New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire.
I would suggest you talk to the chair of health and wellness.
Okay, I will.
Because,
Thank you. I have too many questions today.
And I have a feeling, has all the answers. Because I know they've been doing an awful lot. I mean, I was on there for the last 6 years. And, you know, doing telemedicine, allowing, but you have to get agreements. We've heard about, you can see so many patients in Vermont if you're out of state. I don't know if we've got reciprocal agreements with New York and New Hampshire, so that if you're here and your client is there, we get that a lot with students that go to school. We allowed a lot of leeway during COVID, but now it's with many things where we don't have the crisis and we don't have the money we had then, and we're trying to learn what was good about what we did and what maybe wasn't as good as we'd like and do it back. But I can just about guarantee you that Senator Lyons
We'll have something.
can give you a briefing, yes.
Well, and I will just add that a number of states are doing what Vermont has done, have done or are doing what Vermont has done as far as standing up a telehealth license. And because during COVID, it was so relaxed across state lines, that there's been a lot of experience now that states are interested in keeping in place in the long term.
So last thing on this, just say thank you again, Cody, appreciate this.
Yes.
If we vote this out, I don't currently support it, looking just at the financing piece. I don't like that we can't charge privilege fees. And the other ones allow us to, it costs the state money, time, and IT resources, and we won't be able to recoup that with privilege fee with these additional concerns. So I'm sure Senator Lyons could talk me straight or straighten me out in the next couple of days.
Well, I would
As of
actually
right now, I don't support it.
talk to her because we need, I mean, it's all up or all down. We don't control the privilege fee.
I'm down until Senator Lyons.
Okay. So,
Thank you for having me. I apologize. I have a
Thank you.
patient waiting. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And, I think that you're exactly right. It's all in or it's not. This is one of the points, is that it's a surrender by Vermont. And it's a surrender by Vermont to the larger institution, which is going to potentially do whatever they want. And I think Vermont has had a long tradition of doing what's best for Vermonters. We use master psychologists because the outcomes are shown to be exactly as good as doctorate psychologists. There's been a move within the APA for over 10 years to try to broaden this. And just to give a little background, the APA, it's confusing for people outside the field, but psychologist is a term given to anyone who has a degree in psychology at a master's or PhD level. The vast majority of us psychologists are actually research psychologists, not clinical psychologists like myself, who are interested in the treatment of individuals. Part of the feet dragging of this is that a lot of the research psychologists control the voting rights within these organizations, and they are opposed to the expansion of the term psychologist to be used in any applied measure. And I'm not saying that any of you have to get in on that, because that's a fight for the VPA and the APA to have, and they rightly should. But this is an issue of kind of, will Vermont be moving forward with creating a sustainable system that nurtures and creates more psychological practitioners within it, or will it be outsourcing? And that's my only point I wanted to bring here.
Did you talk to Senator Lyons and the Health and Welfare Committee? Because
I reached out to Jenny, but I did not hear back.
that's unusual. I think we will follow up on that.
Okay. Well, thank you
Okay.
again for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Take
thank you.
care. Enjoy your day.
Okay. Deep breath. Next topic. Miscellaneous agriculture subjects. Why does that make me nervous?
We don't have.
One never knows what it's likely to pop up. But I was reading the summary and it sounds benign, which is what makes me nervous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Here's the-
I'm guessing it may not be there.
Okay,
We'll find out if the house is off the floor, 3:30.
It was in it as it went to the floor.
Pardon?
The trouble is, sections 8 and 9 were in there as it went to the floor.
Should I begin?
you should begin.
This is Mike O'Grady with Ledge Council. You should have in front of you the as passed by House version of H 472, because what has been, the Senate Ag Committee did not make many changes, and they were all very technical in nature. Do you want me to walk through the whole bill or just those that have revenue?
20,000 foot, just so we know what's there.
Okay. The first few sections relate to the agricultural fairs and field days. As you probably all recall, there was previously a stipend and grant program for the fairs, but the boards and commissions bill a couple of years ago repealed the authority for the stipend program because it somehow was derived from the racing board. No, how?
But we did away with the.
You did.
It went away.
Right. So the agency has proposed basically reincorporating the stipend language in Title VI. It effectively follows the spirit of the stipend where all fairs got an equal opportunity to apply for the stipend, but they're now going to apply a formula based on how many days you're open, how many people are in attendance, how many facilities that you have, provided that no fair can get more than 10% of the money appropriated for the stipend. So that's section 1 and 2.
Okay, so where is that money coming from?
That's not the capital grant program that goes into the capital bill to provide grants to the fairs for their capital. It's basically the operating grant that they get. It used to be called a stipend, but it now will be called a grant to help them cover some of their operating costs.
So that's, I'm assuming it's in the budget, it's accounted for.
Yes, it is.
No taxes.
No, nothing, no revenue was part of the agency's base budget. It's just they didn't have authority for it for a couple of years because no one realized that the authority came from the racing board. Should I move on?
Yes, I think.
Section 3 is about using the proper terminology for the licensing of meat processors. Right now it says cutters, when processor is the appropriate term. That section refers to a fee that the processor would pay, but there is no change in the universe and there is no change in the amount of the fee. Just changing,
Beyond the minutes, okay.
changing the name cutting to processing, to cutters, processors. Section 4 relates to weights and measures. The Agency of Ag regulates weights and measures in the state. They require you to get a license for your weighing and measuring device. Currently, they are required to go inspect your weighing or measuring device within 12 months of the date where you applied. They are asking to give them up to 24 months to do the inspection because of the vast number of weighing and measuring devices and not as many staff as they need to do it in a year.
Okay. Expensive.
The next section relates to livestock brands. The literal hot or cold brand that you put on your animal. There is a current law that provides for the agency to register your brand. So it's basically certified as your animal. No one has been doing this because for livestock, the standard is moving away from branding to ear tags and radio frequency identification, and we're just registering with USDA your herd. So the entire chapter is being struck. You can still brand your animal, but there's no registration or certification, no legal effect that the Agency of Ag is going to give you if you do. That chapter had a fee in it, but because no one was registering their brands or getting certification for their animals, there should be no revenue effect at all.
Senator Burns.
Quick question on the prior section. Was there discussion about hiring more people? Because if the program, you have to pay fees, right, to get inspected, didn't, someone said, yeah, there's so many things to inspect, the fee could fund another person to get out there in a more timely way.
That was not a request of the agency, and I don't recall discussion of it. I was not in the committee for all testimony.
Thank you.
The next,
Sorry to interrupt, I'm just curious, I don't see a fiscal note, but there's lots of talks of fees on here. Do you know why there was no fiscal note drafted for this bill?
I do not know. I do think there's almost no revenue impact. You'll get to one where there could be some revenue impact, but it'll be relatively minor. The next several sections relate to apiaries and the agency's regulation of hives and colonies. The first section, section 6, is a registration requirement for your apiary. It only costs you $10 to register your apiary. That is not being changed. The only thing changing in section 6 is that you don't need to notify whether the location of any apiary will change within 2 weeks of the date that you are required to report. The agency just thinks that this is not a necessary requirement.
Is that I was putting it on a truck and moving it to Caledonia, or I was moving it from my front 20 to my back 28?
Right, your permanent location on the area. If you are just still registering, you have to register your location. And if you change that location, you'll have to register that location again, or the new location next year.
Okay, but is the location my property with this address, or is my location my property with this address, and the apiary is 10 feet from the back line and 5 feet from the sideline?
You do have to provide the property. I don't think they're getting to the GPS.
So I was wondering if I've got flowers, if I move the hive
No,
on
you
the
can move your
same.
hive on your
Okay.
property. It's not
Right.
your GPS.
It's if I
coordinates.
decide to move it to Swanton or the other side of
Yes,
town.
or if out of state,
Okay,
Then-
so if it's on the move, other than on my property, I have to know. All right,
Many of the remaining changes in the apiary sections relate to gender conformity language as requested by the agency. So that change is made in section 7.
gender conformity.
I didn't know they had sets for bees.
Oh, yes,
It's generally when referring to the secretary and the use of his or her, and changes, changing it from his or her to the secretaries.
so we're not getting into the bees gender conformity, we're getting into the language gender.
Yes, yes.
Makes more sense.
No queens, drag or otherwise.
Other
Um,
states are not meaning this when they talk about gender conformity, so I'm just glad we're not going there. All right,
So section 7, 8, 9, and 10 are all language, gender, and language changes. Section 11 relates to when you are supposed to get your apiary, your hives inspected prior to sale. Right now, you have to have them inspected at least once each summer season. That is being changed to within 45 days prior to any sale. Because the summer season can last longer than 45 days and your colony can get diseased outside of that 45-day period. Section 12 is a gender conformity change. Section 13 is a gender conformity change. Section 14 is not a gender conformity change. There is currently an exception to getting a health certificate or a certificate of inspection when you import bees into the state. That exception is for when you are going to be registered in Vermont with your apiary. You transport those bees out of state, no more than 75 miles from the registered location, and they are imported back into the state within 30 days of the date of original transport. The agency would like this language struck because they believe, regardless of the fact that you're only 75 miles away, that the bees could, and you're only gone for 30 days, the bees could become infected or diseased, and that there should be a valid inspection health certificate before they come back into the state, because the risk that they pose to other bee colonies.
would this be when you took them out to pollinate somebody's
Yes.
apple orchard and then,
Yes.
okay.
It originally came up a few years ago. It was an apiary in part of the state in Addison that was shipping their bees into New York for pollination, and they didn't want to have to get a registration to come back in. The exception was drafted at that point, but the agency never really supported it, and they continued not to support it.
So the potential impact is there could be an increase in revenue because bees do move, right? And that's the deal here.
I don't think there will be much revenue from this at all for Vermont, because what it will be, you have to get that valid inspection in the state where you're coming from.
Right, okay.
So if New York brings their bees over here to our apple orchards.
Yes.
We'll pick it up, but if ours go to New York, they pick it up. I have a feeling it's not gonna be huge.
I don't believe. Section 15, gender.
In terms of the inspection, let's say the bees are in New York, they're being moved to Vermont, do they have to be inspected in New York before they move?
Yes.
Okay, not inspected in Vermont once they arrive. Okay.
And
Right, you need a valid health certificate from the state of where the transport originated.
Okay.
You'll see that on page 14, at the top of page 14, the language is not changed. And then the last substantive changes in section 16, changing the word hives to colonies. Hives are really the box, where colonies is the multiple
Yeah.
boxes and the bees. So that was a technical change requested by the agency. The next section is a section where I think there will be some revenue impact. A few years ago, you amended the soil amendment and fertilizer law to require that substances or mixtures of substances that are intended to improve the physical, chemical, biological, or other characteristics of soil needed to be registered with the state, needed to pay a permit fee, and needed to basically report their composition for consumer protection. Well, it turns out that those who are not growing in soil, hydroponic specifically, are saying that they don't need to register their products. And the agency wants to be clear that things like hydrodynamic, ionic grow, or hydroponic cultivation needs to be registered to ensure that what it is marketed as really what it is for consumer protection standards. So what is being proposed is on page 16, lines 15 to 16, that a soil amendment would include a substance or a mixture of substance that is intended to improve the physical, chemical, biological, or other characteristics of soil, or a distinct form of horticultural growing media used in lieu of soil. Which is that type of product.
And that, there's a fee to
There's an $85 fee for registration of any of those products.
Okay, so all the fertilizer that's sold here is registered, and this just says the stuff you pour in the hydroponic or
Right, and
if it goes to Moss or whatever else, they have to be registered.
yes,
Those products pay sales tax.
yes. No, actually, I have to look at that sales tax exemption.
If it's agricultural use, they wouldn't.
I think they probably would not.
Yeah, I mean, you got a big hydroponic operation like they do over in Waitsfield.
Yeah. No, I'm just wondering if we're covering all the bases, that's all.
So I can look it up real quick. It's 9741 are the exemptions. Agricultural feed, seeds, plants, baler twine, silage bags, wrap, lining, breeding, agricultural chemicals other than pesticides, fertilizers and pesticides. Yeah, I don't think it would be charged.
Just including as a fertilizer of some
Yeah.
sort. Or what, an amendment.
There's also the one, hold on a second.
All right,
It's the compost one.
but whether it is or isn't requiring them to register shouldn't change that.
Right, it doesn't change. Yeah, so compost animal manure, manipulated animal manure, and planting mix. I don't think it's going to be used, it's going to be taxed either under this, the compost one, or the eat seed and fertilizer one.
We can always have,
So it's an $85 registration, and they're imagining there'll be some new revenue as these things are being sold now.
but probably not.
Not enough to.
No, well, we could pass fertilizer for this program.
So the next section is also a section that will have revenue impact. Currently, nursery dealers, people who sell or distribute nursery stock for commercial gain, are required to get a nursery dealer license. And that license is $60 if the nursery owns or controls a nursery 1/2 acre or more, a greenhouse space of 25,000 square feet or more, or retail space of 25,000 square feet or more. If you don't qualify under any of those three criteria, you pay a $30 fee for a nursery dealer. What the agency is proposing is to require that people who install nursery stock, they place, fix, or plant nursery stock in the ground or soil as their business, also register and get a nursery dealer license. So it may be the landscaper who goes to the nursery and buys 100 trees, warehouses them for their spring or fall planting. The agency wants to know where those plants are, that nursery stock is, because if there is ever a disease, pest infestation, they want to know how to respond and where to respond and who to notify. So most likely, all of these landscapers effectively that are in the business of installing nursery stock that they are not growing on their own will have to pay a $30 nursery dealer license fee.
Where was this one booked? This.
I'd like to know about the issues. Bane of my existence. It's already a foot high and there's still so much snow and mud, I can't get into my backyard and pull it.
And then the last section, well, the last two sections, section 21 and 22.
I got a whole lot of dog people up here, so I'm waiting to see what they will tell us.
Oh,
American Federation of Dog Clubs, and
it's not me.
it's not you.
I was wondering the same thing. Where's the dog piece of this?
I don't know, but since I got in so much trouble with banning ear clipping, I get really nervous when they show up on my agenda. We'll find out.
And then section 22, currently, if the agency exercises its authority to require nursery stock or plants to be destroyed because of plant pest or plant disease, there is currently in law a compensation provision that says the agency shall compensate the owner of those plants for their value. They have not been doing that. Most people that are growing commercially have insurance. And the agency would like this statute struck because they don't think they haven't been doing it. They don't want to do it in the future.
Okay.
So no loss of precedent.
Yeah, so there are multiple sections that look like they have a heat effect, but I think honestly, the only one that will have any real generate any revenue is the registration fee for the hydroponic fertilizers and other.
Is that the manipulated animal manure?
Yes.
I mean, it's been a spreader.
No, it doesn't have to be in a spreader. It just has to be managed in a way.
It's like an opportunity to talk about stacking.
No, so there's manipulated animal and there's manipulated vegetable manure. And so it's a product that is produced from the manure. Vegetable manure is probably not the most appropriate term, but it's a product that's produced for the same purpose as manipulated animal manure or from vegetables.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna take your word because we're not the ag committee.
have you ever seen liquid manure in like a 5-gallon?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's manipulated animal manure. And products like that.
Okay, I just was reading about making willow water, which I assume might be manipulated vegetable.
Looking for a present for that hard to please relative.
I just found out that deer stay away from rhubarb, so I'm looking for rhubarb sets to put amongst my hostas. So I can have pie and get rid of deer at the same time. So, okay.
So I don't know what relates in this bill to dogs.
We will find out, because we have J.D. Stacy Ober, from the New England American Kennel Club, and Mary McFawn. I've got you in that order, but we will go from there and tell us. I have a feeling it's what isn't in this bill you might like in this bill. So the floor is yours. Just introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Cummings, Vice Chair McDonald, and members of the committee. My name is Stacy Ober, and I am the New England Manager of Government Relations for the American Kennel Club, which is a not-for-profit that was founded in 1884, and we are widely recognized as the expert in canine health, breeding, training, and responsible dog ownership. We represent more than 5,000 clubs across the country, including 9 that are in Vermont. And in 2021, AKC licensed or sanctioned 56 canine events in the state of Vermont with over 5,000 participants. So that's a little bit about who I am. And I would like to provide the committee with a high-level understanding of why we've asked for your time this afternoon before Mary McFawn, who's the president of the Vermont Federation of Dog Clubs, shares with you some specifics. We are aware that the governor is working on a holistic look for public safety in general, but we feel there is a direct need for immediate action on animal welfare, and we'd like to explain why. So just a couple of points that I'd like to share and highlight. Vermont commits, as you know, major investments in agriculture to support business entrepreneurship, growth, and sustainability so that food producers and businesses are profitable across a range of sizes, stages, and business models. In the media in Vermont this year, there has been noted serious gaps in Vermont's animal welfare oversight that threatens to undermine Vermont's notable agricultural brand, in our opinion. Last session, the legislature enacted the Acts of 147, Section 38, which mandated a complete report on the unification of animal welfare and public safety functions across state government. That was filed with the legislature in January, and I've submitted a fact sheet to you all and also a link to that report. The reason we're coming to you is that you're likely aware the United States Congress is right now engaging in discussions regarding the reauthorization of the Farm Bill, which happens every 5 years. And we thought it would be important to share with you all that in April, the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Agriculture, their subcommittee on livestock, dairy, and poultry, held a public hearing to review the USDA animal disease prevention and response efforts. And Congress is working on that reauthorization now. We shared with you the written statement by Chairman Thompson in his opening remarks, where he highlights the growing number of imported dogs from African swine fever and rabies affected countries, and the need to stop the illegal entry of meat and fruit products and byproducts. And I've shared a brief copy of that with your clerk also. So the problem that we see regarding animal abuse, unregulated dog importation into Vermont, and zoonosis transmissions is a lack of centralized oversight in Vermont. And so because House 472 relates to miscellaneous agricultural subjects, we believe that a budget neutral next step could be to adopt a new section in House 472 to find out what is currently spent across the 13 Vermont state agencies that are identified in the Act 147, Section 38 report. And we think that the Vermont lawmakers would really benefit from this data in any future policy decision on how to best prepare its response to these threats. And our suggestion would be that the data be reported to your joint fiscal office, who could sort this out over the summer. So we wanted to bring it to your attention in terms of the threat, and I'll turn it over to Mary in terms of sharing with you some specifics with regard to Vermont and our concerns.
Okay, do we have any questions at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Mary, the floor is yours. Now, Mary, you're muted. Need to unmute. You're still muted.
There.
There.
Okay. I'm Mary McFawn. I'm the president of the Vermont Federation of Dog Clubs. As a club, we're interested in animal welfare and responsible dog ownership. There's a big market in the United States for dogs. Some parts of the country have a surplus. Other countries have a surplus. Many dogs are imported into the United States illegally. They don't go through any kind of screening process. They come from Eastern Europe, India, Africa, South America, Asia, and Asia. Most of them come without any shots or paperwork. Other dogs come from parts of this country where veterinary services are scarce and they may or may not have any medical documentation. No one knows how many dogs are illegally imported without health certificates for resale each year in Vermont. No one knows where they come from or what, if any, shots they've had or what diseases they carry. States surrounding Vermont have strict importation and enforcement policies for the importation of dogs. Vermont has some laws, but no enforcement. Dogs are shipped by the truckload to Vermont to prearranged sites where people come from all over New England to pick up their new supply of dogs for sale with little or no attention to paperwork. Unfortunately, dogs can carry diseases which are fatal to them over time and can be transmitted to humans as well as to other animals. The diseases that present the biggest zoonotic risk at this time are rabies and brucellosis. Rabies has been controlled in this country in the canine population because of availability, education, the availability of rabies shots. Recent cases in this country have been traced to imported unvaccinated dogs from countries where rabies is common. India, for example, had about 20,000 people a year die from rabies, about a third of all the deaths from rabies in the world. The data comes from the World Health Organization. Dogs and people usually get rabies by being bitten by an infected animal. There's a type of brucellosis specific to dogs, which spreads through breeding, whelping, and contact with body fluids, including saliva. It's incurable. Dogs can also catch the types of brucellosis more commonly found in cattle or swine, including feral swine, by eating tissue, blood, meat, or other fluids or waste from cattle or swine who are infected with their own more specific strains. This presents a risk to the population in general, as well as to the agricultural section in Vermont. Vermont lacks a comprehensive program that upholds the animal welfare laws of the state through communication, education, and enforcement. So, as Stacy said, we're asking for a Vermont budget neutral next step by inserting language into H472 to find out what is being spent across the 13 entities charged with animal welfare responsibilities. They're noted in the Act 147, Section 38 report. This would give us some solid numbers to help us make more, to move forward with understandable solutions the next session. And you know, thank you for your consideration. And do you have any questions?
Okay. I think we probably have lots of questions. Unfortunately, this is not the committee of jurisdiction. We only have jurisdiction over fees, and this really should go to the Agriculture Committee. We can hold the bill. I would encourage you to be in touch with Senator Bobby Starr. And if he agrees, then we can insert something in the bill. If that works. I know that you didn't used to be required to have heartworm medication in this state because we didn't have it. We have it, and my daughter, who's a vet tech, says it has come in from imported dogs from the southern part of the United States. And so now all our dogs need heartworm medication. And yeah, I'm sure there are, I don't know how big, I know dogs from other parts of the country are an issue here. From other parts of the world, I don't, but it might be a good thing to know.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that offer very much. We have watched closely the committees that have looked at the report and just learned about the United States House of Representatives meeting on the Farm Bill, flagging this as an issue as well. So I think it may have, you know, looking at the report, which is quite lengthy, but very thoughtful and comprehensive, it does a terrific job of identifying all of the 13 state agencies with animal welfare responsibility and also what statutory sections they're responsible for. But it doesn't provide kind of a breakdown of what Vermont is already spending in resources. And so it may have appeared to be a large endeavor to contemplate funding something new. And from our vantage point, we thought it might be germane to this bill in terms of just gathering the financial data that would be useful.
Financial data you want.
Yeah, we're looking for the state agencies to identify what resources are being expended each fiscal year on fulfilling those responsibilities so that the legislature could make an informed decision around maybe how to centralize some of those functions rather than continue with this fragmented system that has resulted in real gaps and holes around.
Okay, could you email us the specifics of, you said what they're spending on each, and at one point you said the 13 entities. What specifically do you want to know how much they're spending on? You want to know how much they're spending on making sure that every dog is vaccinated, or that do you need a law that says no dog shall enter this state without a health certificate? I don't know that we can do that.
I think that's probably premature, Madam Chair. We're just looking to leverage the report that's been done and ask that.
I can guarantee you, no one in this committee has read that report.
And I'm happy to. Yeah, and I'm happy to identify from the report the state agencies identified and what their statutory responsibilities are. I think we're just looking to understand how much the agency is expending in resources each fiscal year on fulfilling those responsibilities.
Okay. On all their responsibilities, or do you, if you have specific responsibilities, if you can email those to us?
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Happy to do that, because the report specifies, again, the statutory section that relates to animal welfare that falls within their purview.
The animal welfare section, okay.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
All right, and this is not specific to dogs. You're looking at.
Correct.
We're not, we have horses out without a shelter in January.
Correct.
All of that, okay. Did that judiciary 1 year.
I was gonna say, the Agency of Agriculture does not have as much authority over domestic pets as you might think.
That's correct.
That's
The report outlines all of the variety of agencies that have a little piece of it. And we just think it would be really helpful to the legislature and all of us to understand who's expending resources on what part of the animal welfare responsibilities at this point.
So the report recommends developing a division of animal welfare. And the question is where that division would be located. The report recommends in the Agency of Agriculture, but certain advocates think it would be better cited at the Department of Public Safety.
I think you're okay. We need to just let the witness talk. And then if you just signal me, I'll get back to you.
And the Senate Agriculture Committee did take testimony about what it would take. More specifically, they looked at the Maine model, which is a centralized state agency with significant local authority as well. And I think what concerned that committee was the cost of the Maine program. It cost just for the centralized system of about $2.6 million a year. And they raised most of that money from dedicated fees. And so I think the witness's request about how much it costs is ultimately going, if you follow the model, the report will be about how much you will need to raise as well.
Okay. So what they want to know is right now, how much does each of the 13 different agencies spend?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
That's beyond our authority. That would go either to approach as part of a proposal to do this. Where is ag right now? They just.
I think, I don't know if I can characterize their position. They took the testimony, they considered it. I think they acknowledge that there needs to be more centralized or more vigorous enforcement or coordination, but I don't think they really took a position one way or the other.
Okay. I will try and talk to Senator Starr at Chair's meeting today before or after. And just let him know that the American Kennel Club and the Federation of Dog Clubs in Vermont have both approached us. It sounds like ag has read it, is dealing with it. How much is spent really is outside our jurisdiction. But it sounds like they're working on it, and I will double check with him. If you drop him a line and tell him what you'd like, I'll talk to him. If the ag committee wants something extra, this committee can add it. Okay.
That would be wonderful, and we're happy to follow up
wonderful.
with him to be specific about what we think would be useful data going forward.
So where did he get his new Boston Bulldog? Not off the truck. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it for this one. I'm gonna hold on to it for 24 hours to give ag a chance to talk to us about it. At 4 o'clock, we have, and I thought we were in really good shape getting bills out of here. Now we're falling behind because we keep getting more bills. Cannabis. Are we gonna be ready to vote that out? Okay, then that will go on tomorrow. This psych pack compact, are we
I just talked to Senator Lyons, and she
Yeah.
said she doesn't have a strong opinion on it. She encouraged me to talk to the deputy secretary, so I will talk to her, but I think there's votes, so I'll be a no unless she convinces me between now and then, so I'm not gonna try.
Okay, well, I'm running short of votes, so we'll try and make sure Senator Rahm is here. But I'd like to either get that resolved up or down. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference, but I don't know if we're gonna resolve
I'll do some research tonight.
the issues. Okay, and then we have it 4 o'clock, and I thought we were getting set to vote it out. Did that the professional rate up? It is. It just made the second take, possible vote. So Michael.
Oh, probably see you
wants-
tomorrow.
Yeah, Bobby wants anything he needs to tell us.
Okay, all right. Well,
And I'll try and get a hold of the chairs. And see if we can go. Other than that, the ag bill, can we put that on for a vote? And get that out, and see if we can move that a little further. Professional regulation, have we got anybody coming in on that, or is it just us?
That we would be voting, so.
Okay.
They'll pop in if they want to.
Okay, but that, we've been over that at least twice. We have, right now, I only have 4 of us. No, is Keisha there for a vote? And Mary, and Stacy, we're not gonna take your bill up anymore today. We've got professional regulation fees to vote out. And I have a feeling there'll be a lot of bills on Friday, maybe Thursday to vote out. And that if, we'll do what we can with ag, and see if they want anything added on.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mary, you're muted. I don't know.
Yeah, Mary is muted. Goodbye.
I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to say thank you very much.
Oh, anytime. Okay. So we've got 10 minutes. You want to take a 10-minute break? Is there anything else in here? The bottle bill, I don't know. 470 is tomorrow. We'll put all of these on for Friday for votes. That's the alcohol bill. Is it good for Friday? That's got some fee changes in it. And I'm trying to remember, Randy, what? It's got some license changes, and maybe that's some fee
Which one are you
changes.
talking about?
The alcohol, 470
Oh, yeah.
came out of economic
I think
development.
I think I remember the controversial and all.
No, the number of permits to farmers markets, but that's all the other
Yeah.
committee. We got it solved. I think there's some fee adjustments in it, so it should be another in and out. Yes, and tomorrow we are going to vote out the yield bill. There doesn't seem to be anything moving in that. And they'd like to get it set. Okay, and on Thursday, we've got Jake and Julia coming back with that run about what would happen if we moved everything up in the income sensitivity, $100,000, $10,000, whatever. And then we're going to do a walkthrough with miscellaneous tax, which is the one big bill in our jurisdiction that's still here. So far, it's unbelievably uncontroversial. We've talked about, we've got the bond bank language, so we'll be looking at putting that on. And then the most controversial thing there, the requirement that the towns put in easy language explanation of the property tax credits on the back of the bill, even though they already have to do inserts if their envelopes will hold inserts. Apparently, legal aid wants to make sure that more people know about property tax credits. I don't know if there's any statistic that tells us that people that are eligible aren't applying. I'm just coming out of my old realtor days where I never annoyed a town clerk because they held my life in their hands. But I tend not to want, they're doing the work, and if they tell us it's a lot of extra work, you know, if you're going to a stuffing, which, you know, most of the bigger towns do, but these smaller towns, I mean, Montpelier, when I was there, they stuffed tax bills in envelopes by hand. They were there late into the night, all hands on deck, stuffing envelopes.
People have enough information to intelligently make decisions, and if they don't, then that's something we need to fix.
We have put so much stuff on ballots and on tax bills, all hoping to get people to not vote up their budgets. As far as I can tell, it hasn't. I get my property tax bill and I look at the number. I don't look at the inserts in between. I look at the number, I slam it back in and say, I'll deal with it on the 15th. You know, it's, but we'll decide if it's worth doing. And
You talked briefly about possibly considering S45, the salt deduction, to add it to miscellaneous. I only bring it
I
up.
hear it is coming back on
childcare.
something.
And that's fine if it comes back on childcare. I just remember since then, like a week and a half ago, the tax commissioner caught me and he wanted to make 2 small tweaks. And so I don't know if those tweaks are in what's coming back or.
The one tweak I've heard about is it has something to do with the law says this is to do with entities that have an out-of-state member. So you got an accountant that's in New Hampshire, but he's part of your office, but he does the New Hampshire office, that the tax was assessed at the middle rate, which when we had 5 rates worked. They've been doing it to but we shrank the top 2, so we only have 4. So they have been doing it at the next to the highest rate. There was that, and there's something else, but I don't know if it was in salt. No, it was the child tax credit and the EEIC. They all phase out, and they would like all the phase out and wordings for all tax credits to be the same, so that it's more understandable. You don't have 5 different things to keep track of. Those are the 2 changes I've heard of.
Are we getting that from the House? Do we want to talk about it, or-
I understood that salt was stuck on the Barry Tift bill.
No, I think I heard that, well, I don't know, maybe, but I heard it was on the child care bill, it's 56.
Okay,
We
well,
heard the tip bill, a ton of stuff, I guess.
I think they think we want that. I don't know. Jane and I we're trying to figure out what's going on with both those bills and paid family leave and trying to see if we can go home.
Right.
Okay, 5 minutes, and then we will take up
Are we having chairs yet?
Yes, at 4:30. So we have 305, which is all the professional fees they've raised by. I've got 4 of us. Keisha, are you with us?
$200,000.
And again, they have been running, they have been running at a deficit. And this is how they enforce the professions, go after that.
I read it too quickly, $72,000 they're hoping to pull.
Net by the change.
Correct.
You go back over the years, I was thinking when I first got involved in professional fees was back when I was chairman of the licensing board. And during the noon hour for the professionals, if somebody called with a problem, a question about professional registration, the deputy secretary of state was the one who was charged with answering the phone. Now they got, how many, 40 people?
Well, it would be interesting to have a conversation with former Governor Douglas about this because he ran that office and he has a distinct take on regulation. You know, with a pretty high threshold, I believe there's demonstrable harm and possible harm. And I don't know, he didn't seem predisposed.
I remember at that time, we were licensing another thing, itinerant peddlers and fortune tellers. I don't think are licensed anymore.
That's what I'm looking for. All 3. I've got to report that bill tomorrow. So somebody remind me to take that up. Okay, what is your pleasure on Act 305, H305? Are we ready?
I don't think we've talked at all about amending any of those.
No, we have not.
Okay, so I would be moving that the committee report favorably H305, an act related to professions and occupations regulated by the Office of Professional Regulation. We don't have our clerk.
As it came, where is
Do
that?
we have 4 votes? If Senator Rum
1,
is.
2, 3, 4.
You're right, okay.
4 of us.
Well, there are 4 of us here. So.
And Senator Rahm is not with us. Does anyone know where Senator McDonald?
He was going down the hall when I was coming back.
If he's coming back up the hall or if he's decided to go home and feed his cows. Sometimes it's hard to know. I would prefer us having as many people. We do not have Senator McCormick.
I thought the dog people were here because of the branding, when it changes so that we're not regulating branding, that they were worried that we're gonna start branding dogs.
My grandfather had a branding iron, HQ. My grandmother used to joke he branded her. All his garden tool, all his yard tools, all his shovels had HQ branded.
When I started to run, they said, walk.
Okay, now we have 5 members. So Senator McDonald, Senator Gray has moved that we report H305 favorably. That is the professional regulation fee bill. Yeah, that they have raised everything except those highlighted in rows that have been raised at an inflationary rate in order to make up their deficit that they have been offering. Okay, further discussion on H305. Ready? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. I've got that 502. I'd like to report this one.
Always happy to, as long as it's not healthcare.
Okay. You want to do this one? That is
It's always filling up the other room, so I'm happy to. But
I have 3 to do the next. And I want to do them all together and they put them on 2 separate days. So I could stand up and say, can I report on all 3? Because the total is It looks like we're gonna have an impact all total of $104,000.
That's over the first one.
That's right, pass over them all, do them all at once too. So, okay, I'm gonna stand up here, but the model for 3 days is that. Senator Gray.
So it passes the schedule more than 1 day rule. I don't know if you're interested in hearing a motion on H282 and that relating to psychology interjurisdictional compact.
Are we ready to vote on that one? I want to hear from any
I still don't
more.
have the word.
Senator Chittenden, please
Okay.
report it.
Missed acceptance of it.
Okay, so we have a motion to report H282, the psychology interjurisdictional compact out favorably. Again, we have there's a separate one on this. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. I'm getting that as 4,
Or
1, 2,
2, right?
but 2 out, 1 no. Okay. Does anyone want, well, I told the ladies I'd hold on to miscellaneous agricultural subjects. So we'll put that on. So that's out. Okay, all right, you want me to do psychological too? Because I've got the other 3 compacts.
This gives you a complete set.
This gives me a complete set. And I'll ask them if I can just stand up and say ditto. The adult use marijuana, are we ready to vote that out? There were a lot of requests for changes, none of which are really, I
Did you say
can't,
marijuana or
cannabis,
cannabis?
yes,
Yeah, I
270.
was trying to get a hold of the constituent that makes the pipes, so we got
Oh.
email with Abby Shepherd to submit.
Okay, we'll hold on to it if there's something you think you may want to put on there as housekeeping, and that would be clarifying. That is a pretty much de minimis impact.
We're interested to know the total, well, Bryn was gonna send us sort of a spreadsheet of the taxes and where the money is going.
Right.
So that will be interesting to know, because 35,000, I'm guessing is a small portion of the total number of dollars
Oh, it
flowing
is.
through that program.
That program was advanced money from the general fund for like the first at least 2 years.
Is that the
Because
control
it
board?
had no money coming in.
You remember how much?
No, but that's why the excise tax is going to the general fund for 2 years. Because it's reimbursing the general fund for what the general fund paid. Then the excise tax will be going to the control board, I think, for their operations. I am not prepared at this point to do the 10% and the 20% of the taxes. I just have a hard time getting my head around who are the disadvantaged communities in Vermont. How are we defining them? How do you qualify to get tax dollars to set up your business? I mean, I'm a college student. I couldn't get a job because I had a possession on my, does that make college students a, you know, in a negatively impacted class? I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, right, the story I've heard the most is that the war on drugs and disproportionate impacts on.
It did. And nationally, I don't think there's any doubt that it impacted communities of color more than it, but this is Vermont, and I'm not sure, mostly because we didn't have much of a community of color that worked here, and so what are,
Who did Lawrence do that one? The,
oh, that was before when I moved here, he was just getting in trouble.
So Paul Lawrence?
Yeah,
I did the Paul Lawrence investigation.
pardon?
I did the Paul Lawrence investigation.
you did.
So, I mean, was he a?
No, he was an equal opportunity criminal. He flicked everybody.
What was his role?
He was a police undercover.
They
Falsified a lot of stuff.
This time he worked for St. Albans. Before that, he worked for the Gen. Before that, he was a trooper. And he had a bad record in every place he worked.
Had to falsify a lot of stuff. They had to go back and
They
vacate sentences on where he had
Several
testified.
hundred people where he testified falsely. He was getting the drugs from New York State.
Bobby, I need to talk to you.
State police.
I need to talk to you, but I need to get a bill upstairs too. The American Federation of Kennel Clubs and Mary McFawn, Topper's wife, for the Vermont Federation of Dog Clubs, was here on the miscellaneous ag bill.
Yeah.
And they want a study or a report on how much money all 13 entities put into animal welfare.
All 13.
I asked them to email me because I had no idea, but you've got a report that came back. Michael had read it, he was here.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the cost of this centralized animal welfare office in Maine. Anyway, that's really what they want. And
Well, they've got a bunch of people that, new people, just for that.
well, I think that's what they want to know. I don't know.
It was-
But it's not my jurisdiction. I said, if you wanted me to add something to the bill, I'd add, and they're gonna be in contact.
Oh,
So I'm sitting on the bill till Friday.
well, I think they figured they need a vet and 2 or 3 other people. So say you get 4 new people.
That's a lot of money. But my daughter, who's a vet tech, says that heartworm is here to stay because of all the dogs from the south that have come up here and brought it with
By the
them.
truckloads.
Yeah. Oh, my neighbor went down to pick a dog up at a truck in Lebanon. She was taking it to a shelter here. He was such a good dog, she kept him, and he's still living across the street. She
Yeah.
says, I just decided he could come home with me.
So she's coming back.
They're supposed to be talking to you. I said, I'd talk to you. And if you thought we should add something, we'd add it.
Well, it's, I think, across the street here,
It's for
across the hall to come up with.
Well, she just wants a list. What, because I guess Michael says it's 2.9 million in Maine. And she wants to, I think what they want to know is what are we spending on animal welfare now?
Oh, well,
I think that's what they want to
we
know.
can get that,
Okay,
sure.
well,
Not
Tom,
to put it in the bill.
she wants a report on how much we're spending.
Or how much was.
We're spending, yes, I think what they're saying is, see, it won't cost that much. I gotta take the
So you,
fee bill
what
out.
chairs I've got here yet?
Oh, that's right, chairs, well, we're finished, so chairs can come.
So Michael said that, I think they had draft legislation that.
Oh, here. Ooh, I don't even have the.
Up there.
It's a fleet car.
They're
Throw this one
but it's mostly in the Philippines, down the southern one. But we talked about that, and we thought it was very expensive to do.
There you go, and Senator Chittenden was on his way up. Yeah. Okay.
They've got more.
Jill, can you print me a new list of bills in
I'll have to
committee?
call.
Because my other one is
I'll
outdated.
call over there, get the Ben.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Now I can find. Professional regulation. That one.
Well, must be that our meeting's at 4:30. 7 minutes.
Yes, it's at 4:30.